Mandatory minimum sentences are not cost effective. They lock up too many people for too long, and as a result, taxpayers have to pay for a bloated correction system.
Beginning in late 2013, many of Pennsylvania's mandatory minimum sentencing laws were ruled unconstitutional because they allowed judges, not juries, to find the elements of a crime. Some Commonwealth policymakers now want to rewrite and reinstate mandatory sentencing laws. That's a bad idea. For one thing, there's no evidence that mandatory minimums make the public safer. Several years ago, the Pennsylvania legislature ordered the Sentencing Commission to conduct a comprehensive review of the state's mandatory sentencing laws. The commission found that only 1 in 3 people knew which crimes carried a mandatory minimum sentence. Of course, people can't be deterred by something they don't even know about. Pennsylvania Corrections Secretary John Wetzel shares the view of nearly all criminal justice experts on the minimal role deterrence plays in drug crimes.
When you look at the research around deterrence, especially for drug crimes, it's absent. I don't see it. If the people who are on the corner selling drugs were big picture, long-term cost-benefit folks, they wouldn't be on the corner selling drugs. That's not the crowd.
The Pennsylvania Sentencing Commission also concluded after its review that neither the length of sentence nor the imposition of a mandatory minimum per se was a predictor of recidivism. The Commission's finding is bolstered by real-world experience.
We've reduced our prison population by 3.7%. Over the same time frame, crime has been reduced by 16.6%. And since mandatory minimums are out, crime still continues to go down and prison population still continues to go down.
Despite this progress, some district attorneys assert that mandatory minimums are needed because judges are too lenient and not following Pennsylvania's sentencing guidelines. That's not what the facts show. According to the Pennsylvania Sentencing Commission, judges sentenced within the guidelines 90% of the time. They departed below the guideline range in just 7% of cases, usually because the district attorney asked them to. DAs also assert that they need mandatory minimums to coerce defendants into pleading guilty and cooperating. Again, the facts suggest otherwise. Even without mandatory minimums, the plea rate for felony drug cases, for example, remains extraordinarily high. Certainly DAs are not making deals that put dangerous offenders back on the streets too soon. Put simply, Pennsylvanians don't need mandatory minimums to be safe. In fact, these one-size-fits-all sentences waste money that could be directed to more effective anti-crime purposes, like hiring more police and prosecutors and providing more drug and mental health treatment.
Reinstating mandatory minimums in Pennsylvania would devastate our budget.
Department of Corrections staff estimate that reinstating mandatory minimum sentencing laws could cost as much as $85.5 million per year. That's why family and taxpayer advocates across the ideological spectrum don't want mandatory minimums back in Pennsylvania.
The Commonwealth Foundation and other organizations that believe in limited government supports ending mandatory minimum sentences because they're not effective and because they really impose a one-size-fits-all solution on this problem of crime. Conservatives don't favor a one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to healthcare or education, and corrections shouldn't be any different.